The air in Hoshimura was always thick with secrets, but none as palpable as the ones that clung to the girl who walked Wisteria Road. Her name was Amaya, though few dared to speak it, preferring the safety of hushed murmurs and sidelong glances. She moved with a quiet grace, her simple, pale kimono rustling no louder than the wind passing through the ancient cherry trees that lined the path. The blossoms of the sakura were her constant companions, falling like pink, whispered secrets onto the worn flagstones of the road. A road that was the unofficial border between the bustling village heart and the forgotten district where she lived alone. Amaya was a riddle wrapped in silk. No one in Hoshimura could recall her arrival. She had simply materialized one spring years ago, paying for her solitary life with antique coins and offering only the faintest whisper of a thank you. The villagers filled the vacuum of her past with folklore, a lost spirit bound to the grove, a runaway noble hiding a shadowed lineage, or even a cunning kitsune, charming coins from travelers. But today, as the dawn light touched the tips of the blossoms, painting them in rose and gold, Amaya's usual serenity was marred by a subtle tension. Her hands were clasped tighter at her waist, and her observant dark eyes, which missed nothing, the nervous flutter of a sparrow, the fleeting shadow of a petal, were now focused on a new, unsettling pattern in the village's undercurrent. Over the last few days, strange kindnesses had disrupted the quiet rhythm of Hoshimura. Old man Tanaka, the gruff potter, found his favorite heirloom teapot, missing for a week, returned to his porch. It wasn't empty. It was filled with warm green tea of a rare mountain variety, and tucked beneath it was a single, pristine white camellia. The next day, young Kenji, the apprentice carpenter, awoke to find his clumsily broken tools not only repaired and sharpened, but laid out neatly beside his sleeping mat. On the pile, another camellia. The white camellia, Amaya knew, was a flower of the deep mountains, a day's journey away, and a local symbol of a swift and silent departure. It was the flower of a complete mystery. Amaya understood that these were more than random acts of charity. They were messages. The silent currents of the village carried these stories directly to her, the outsider, the observer. And the mystery deepened when she reached the heart of Wisteria Road, where the ancient unlit stone lantern stood sentinel beneath the heaviest canopy of blossoms. She paused, her gaze dropping to a small mossy recess at the lantern's base. There, nestled amongst the fallen petals, was an intricately carved wooden bird. It was a uguisu, a Japanese nightingale, crafted in a style unique to Master Hiroki, the village's famed carver who had vanished nearly 2 decades prior. His disappearance had been as sudden and inexplicable as Amaya's arrival. And beside the carving lay a third, perfect white camellia. This was no returned teapot. This was a personal communication. The stone in Amaya's stomach hardened. The game, she realized, had escalated, and someone was trying to play it with her. That evening, a silver sliver of moon hung over the cherry grove. Amaya waited until the last lantern in the village was extinguished. She slipped out of her small house, the silence of the forgotten district swallowing the soft sound of her footsteps. She carried nothing but the carved wooden bird, tucked securely into her kimono sleeve. She didn't return to the stone lantern. She followed a deeper instinct, an uncanny pull toward the old shrine at the end of the road. It was a ruin now, its wooden eaves rotting and its guardian Komainu statues covered in thick moss. The air here was colder, heavier, saturated with the faint, sweet smell of decaying wood and damp earth. In the center of the shrine courtyard stood a massive, lightning-scarred wisteria tree, its vines coiling around its trunk like ancient serpents. She walked straight to the tree and felt the rough bark. Her fingers searched the deep crevices until they found a nearly invisible knot, a small, circular depression that wasn't natural. She pressed it. With a barely audible grind, a stone slab beneath the wisteria roots shifted, revealing a narrow, black opening. A chill wafted up, smelling of dust and centuries of undisturbed air. This was no ordinary path. This was a passage known only to the very old spirits of the place, or perhaps to those bound to them. She hesitated for only a moment. The white camellias, the lost bird, the mended tools, they were all threads woven around one core truth. A presence was active in the village, a presence deeply connected to its past, and that presence was leading her. Amaya descended into the darkness. The passage was cramped and wound steeply downward. After what felt like an eternity, it opened into a vast, dry underground chamber. The space was not natural. It was clearly an old, hidden storage vault, perhaps a place where sacred scrolls or valuable materials had been kept centuries ago. Torches, already lit, sputtered along the rough-hewn walls, casting long, dancing shadows. But what drew Amaya's attention was the center of the room, a large, intricately carved wooden panel depicting the story of the founding of Hoshimura leaned against a stone altar. It was a masterpiece, but it was not complete. There was a section missing, a gap in the center of the narrative. Laying before the altar was a collection of items, neatly organized. There was the restored teapot of Old Man Tanaka, the sharpened tools of Kenji, and dozens of other trinkets she recognized as things that had recently gone missing and reappeared. It was a silent museum of the miracles, and scattered around the objects like snow were dozens of white camellias. A figure emerged from the deeper shadows of the chamber, tall, cloaked, with a cowl pulled low over their face. Their voice, when it spoke, was a low, resonant murmur, difficult to place as either definitively male or female, old or young. "I knew you would follow the bird, Amaya." Amaya stood perfectly still, her hand still gripping the wooden nightingale. "Who are you?" she whispered. "A caretaker, a repairer, a messenger," the figure replied, taking a step forward. "I have waited a long time for the village to notice, and longer still for you to notice." "The gifts," Amaya pressed. "Why the gifts? Why the camellia?" "The camellia signifies the truth, that everything here is fleeting, everything falls. The village is broken, its trust, its memory, its story. The gifts were to mend the things that are replaceable, to see who was watching. But the bird was for you." The figure gestured toward the altar. "Look closely at the panel." Amaya approached the large wooden carving. As she inspected the missing section, a wave of recognition, sharp and cold, washed over her. She knew this panel. She knew the craftsmanship. It was Master Hiroki's final, unfinished work, the piece he was working on before he vanished. "Master Hiroki didn't run away, Amaya," the figure said, the voice softening with a quiet sadness. "He didn't run. He was broken by those who sought to take this." The figure tapped the carving. "He hid his tools, hid the final piece, and then he departed." The figure stepped forward again, reaching into their cloak. They withdrew a carved piece of wood, small and perfectly shaped to fill the gap in the central panel. It depicted a small, lone figure standing beneath a sakura. He left behind only the white camellia, the symbol of his final, silent departure. But he also left behind his most prized apprentice, an apprentice who spent years mending what he could not, the things people loved, the things that reminded them of what they'd lost. The apprentice who hid, waiting for the village to forget the man who had truly stolen from Hoshimura. Its own story. The figure slowly reached up and pulled back the cowl. It wasn't Master Hiroki. It wasn't a spirit. It was an elderly woman, her face deeply lined, her eyes weary but sharp, eyes that held a painful familiarity. Your mother was Hiroki's apprentice, the woman stated, her voice trembling slightly. But before she could finish the work, she vanished too. She left you here, Amaya, years ago, under the cherry blossoms, with these instructions: to wait for the one who carries the camellia and mends the broken. That was her final silent hope. The elderly woman held out the carved missing piece. I have mended the items. I have returned the teapot. I am a messenger, but I am not the final piece. You are. You carry his blood, and you carry her story. Amaya looked from the carved nightingale in her hand, the apprentice's final test, to the woman, then to the final missing panel piece. The depiction was not a generic figure. It was a girl in a simple kimono, standing alone beneath the sakura. She slowly lifted the carved nightingale and placed it onto the altar. Her hands, steady now, reached out and took the missing panel from the elderly woman. She fit it into the gap in the massive wooden mural. It slotted perfectly, completing the story of Hoshimura, finally linking the girl under the cherry trees to the village's long-lost history. The final piece was not a treasure, not a spirit, but Amaya herself, the inheritor of a hidden legacy, finally ready to complete the work of the lost craftsman. The mystery of the camellias was solved. They were not warnings of a ghost, but signposts left by an old woman finishing a promise, guiding the last remaining member of a secret lineage to their true inheritance. Amaya, the outsider, was now the guardian of Hoshimura's greatest secret.